Hello, everyone. We are back in session from Monday. You can kind of tell my voice is a little bit shaky right now. I don't think I'm terribly sick. I feel fine. I'm coughing a little bit. I'm just wearing the mask as a precaution. I do remember this back in the days of COVID when I was teaching, and I've got used to it. Although I didn't have to wear glasses back then, so I'm a little bit worried that my glasses may fog up while I'm trying to read my notes. So there may be a little bit of comedy in today's actions. Yes.
Just speaking from experience, I was working a job where I had to wear safety goggles at the time. I recommend like fully pressing in as hard as you can.
Yeah,
like,
that's kind of what I was trying to do, is trying to make sure that there was nothing coming up, but it's very, very hard to limit any air coming up. Monday, like quite literally, if I tried to come in on Monday, nobody would have been able to hear me. I think probably I'm talking kind of at the top of my voice right now, and this is like should have been half of that. So it would have been a real challenge. The irony being is I already had those class sessions recorded from last year. And I said, all right, well, it's just a happy convenience that we managed to work it out. So yeah. And yes.
If you ever have this experience again where you have to wear a mask and your glasses, I recommend cat crap. There's a vial of stuff. You can put it on your lenses, it'll polish clear and keep them from fogging.
All right, I'll take a look at that.
Many 12-hour shifts at the hospital.
Yeah, I always wondered how they got away with that, because yeah, they say that they had to wear the protective coverings, and a lot of them had to wear glasses. So good information. All right, so I got a few things we need to talk about before we get started. We're gonna have a fairly short class today because we're just gonna be going over the homework. But we do have a lot of things up on the coming up. So obviously Friday, I've mentioned it a few times already, but I want to remind you, is the due date for the professional interaction. My assumption is everybody's finished that, but has not been done the write-up yet, because only about a third of the classes submitted the write-up yet. So if you've not submitted your write-up for your professional interaction, please make sure you do so. It is not an onerous task. You just need to write 2 paragraphs. One about what the professional interaction was about, one paragraph about what you learned from it. That's all there is to it. It is due by the beginning of class time on Friday. Then next week, Friday, we'll have an exam review, and our exam will be on Wednesday. So we'll, for the exam review, please make sure you complete the practice exam in advance and review the study guide and come in ready to ask questions about that. We'll do the review just as we did last time. I'll go over the review at a very high level. If you have questions about the study guide or the practice exam, you can ask them then. Then we'll talk about the practice exam. The solutions to the practice exam will be available on Friday once class begins. But again, I strongly recommend that you complete the practice exam in advance of Friday's class session. Presentations are coming up. So keep in mind your deliverable 2 for the presentations is going to be due a week from Friday. So hopefully you've been working on that, thinking about that. It is not something that I think is going to be a very difficult challenge for most of you. Given that I hear people talking about 10, 20-page reports, I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a page or 2 synopsis of what your research is about. So this is meant to be light impact, something that you're going to enjoy. So I would like you to dissect that a little bit. Also, please keep in mind that anything that you do as part of your research, you need to deliver as an appendix to that. So there's going to be a separate submission associated with that. So kind of your transcript. If you just submit the 1 or 2 page synopsis, then I'll probably come back and say, I can't grade this because I don't have any basis for understanding what you did the work on. So I'd like to see the work as well, please. And then something that came up, I meant to talk about this on Monday, but I was not here on Monday, so I can't do that. A few people have asked this question already. I want to make sure I address this. I noticed that a lot of people here did not do the extra credit for the for VITA, which I thought that I had made it pretty clear that that was the extra credit opportunity. I announced it in class several times, but apparently I did not make it clear enough, and that's my fault if I didn't do that. People were asking if there's another extra credit opportunity. The answer is no, but before you string me out, hear me out. So I want to talk about this. Because of my poor communication, I do not want to hold the extra credit opportunity against people in the classroom. And I do think that the VITA is a unique experience, and I didn't think that I could replicate that very effectively. So that's why I'm not offering an extra credit opportunity. However, if you did not participate in VITA, I will not count that against you for terms of opting out of the final exam. Okay, I'm going to waive that simply because that was my fault for not being very apparent on that. Additionally, if you have been consistent in the class in all other respects and would have opted out of the final exam anyway, say you get to the end of semester and you're 5 points short of getting to the next grade, I will consider that the fact that you missed out on the extra credit opportunity in my calculation. All right. I'm not saying I'm going to give you a free 10 points. I'm going to say that I will make sure that I will be very considerate about that. And it feels like, well, this person has done everything they did and they're just really, really short of getting that B. I will bump you up to a B. All right. So I will try not to count the lack of extra credit opportunity against you, but I don't plan on offering another one. Yes. No, if you did VITA, then I got a list of it, and it should be you should have your points already on Brightspace listed there. But I received a list of people who participated in VITA, so if you were on that list, then you should have the points on the already. If there's any questions about that, I'm happy to clarify. Ultimately, what I'm trying to convey is that if you missed out on the extra credit, don't sweat it too much. It's not going to make that big a difference. And I will try to do my best to make sure that you get the next highest grade, again, assuming that you've done everything else that I've asked you to do in this course. Okay. And then final thing I wanted to talk about, Friday, we will be having class. A lot of people said, can we have class? Can we skip class, Dr. Barnes? The answer is no. We do have stuff to talk about, primarily the exam preparation. That being said, given that it's between a Thursday, which is quote unquote a day off, and then a 3-day weekend effectively, I do expect a lot of people will have alternate plans. Many people may be heading home. If that's the case and you can't make class, that's fine. There's still the same rules apply as for every single class. You do need to communicate that to me. If you're going to be on Zoom, you need to tell me you're going to be on Zoom. If you're not going to make class, that's fine. You're grown-ups by now. I'm not going to try to dictate your life. If you're going to miss class, the only thing I insist upon is that you tell me that you're going to miss class. All right. That's all that I need to know. And yeah, just please be sure that you're responsible and consider that going forward. Even if you're not in attendance in class on Friday, we'll hold you accountable for the materials that we're covering on Friday. All right. With that, let's get to the last homework assignment of the semester. Doesn't that feel good to hear? Last homework assignment of the semester, because that means we're almost there. How do you feel at this point? Are you relieved or are you just panicked saying it's the last homework, but there's still much so much to do?
Panicked, but not about this class.
Panicked, but not about this class. That's what I like to hear. Okay, panicked, but not about this class. Yeah, that's where we're at. Okay, so some fairly basic questions here. I think some of the questions will require a little bit of explanation. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up something real quick that I should have opened up at the beginning of the or before I started this. But I'm going to open up the slides so I have those available. And in a second. All right. So question number one, authentication is a process by which the what? So authentication, keep in mind, what is authentication? And by definition in the chapter 14 presentation, authentication is verifying your user identity. All right. So which of these actually represents that idea of verifying your user identity? So system verifies, all right, we're on a good track right now, that the user is entitled to enter the transaction requested. Now, that is an authorization step, but that's not an authentication step. That's actually saying after authentication has been validated, then we know what you're authorized to do within the system. So A is not authentication. System verifies the identity of the user. That's almost verbatim what we just said, okay? So B is our answer. User identifying him or herself to the system. It's the other way around. The system has to actually verify, not us verifying for the system. The user indicates the system the transaction processed correctly. Again, that's an authorization, but not authentication. All right, question number 3. All right. This is one that will be on the exam, and I do want to make sure we're clear on this because it's a little bit confusing. I do think the analogies help out with this, but I tend to think this is a complex concept that's really, really challenging. So remember we talked about 2 different types of encryption systems. We talked about the symmetric key encryption and asymmetric key encryption. And these are in the slides on chapters. Oops, I'm not going to log in. All right, it's bad. I'm not going to log in. I don't care what you say. All right. So chapter 14 slides and chapter 14 for slides 10 and 11. So symmetric key encryption, for the encryption and the decryption process, it uses the same key. Okay, it uses the same key. It's considered to be a private key for encryption and decryption. And this is possible because it is within the organization itself. It's internal. We do not share externally with the information, the external stakeholders. This is actually for communication specific to internal transactions or transmissions within the organization. And the way that I think about it is a padlock. Okay, you can use the same key to open a padlock. It has to be exactly that same key. Can there be copies of that same key? Yes, but it has to be exactly that key. That combination has to be used. Then we have asymmetric key encryption. Okay, This is where we actually use two different keys. We have a public key and a private key, and it's going to be slower than symmetric because it's used externally, and it's not suitable for large data sets. But we can actually have partners involved in it who are not part of the organization. So there's going to be a public key, which is going to be the receiver's public key, and it's going to be common for all the receivers who are going to be used to encrypt this. And then each individual uses their private key to decrypt it. The way I think about it is the ATM card, okay? The bank has all your common information across all the customers, and they can actually put information into the accounts, put money into the accounts. And then you can receive the account or some money from the account by your unique identifier, which is going to be that private key. That's the ATM card that you put in the ATM to withdraw money. That's not a perfect analogy, but that's the best analogy that I can come up with for this particular concept. So it's important to note that in the asymmetric situation that we're going to have a receiver's public key that's responsible for encryption, and then a receiver's private key that's responsible for decryption, which is important for the next few questions that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to answer the question. To ensure confidentiality in an asymmetric key encryption system, knowledge of which of the following keys is required to decrypt the receiving message. So we're talking about decryption. What's the receiving message? So we talk about private. This is for decryption. So A is definitely or one. You'll notice down here it doesn't say A or B. It says 1 or 2. This is one of those weird things. So the electronic system, it completes these. I'm not sure why, but think of these as 1 and 2 right now. So A and B. So A/1 is private, which is decryption. Public, which is 2, is going to be encryption. So which is responsible for decryption? It's going to be A, which is going to be A, which is weird. Yeah. Anyway, that's something by the way, it's something for the electronic system on McGraw-Hill. I'm not sure why they do it. I think on the textbook they have this right. This is actually listed as 1 and 2, but for some reason online it messes that up. Moving to question 5. To ensure that data set over the internet are protected, which of the following keys is required to encrypt the data? So before transmission, use an asymmetric key encryption method. This is where we noted that we're going to be using the public key. Now remember, this is specifically stated that we're using the receiver's public key. That's what it's referred to as, because all the receivers have the same common key. So the receiver's public key is going to be D as our answer. All right, question number 7. Question number 7 is an interesting one because I always squabble about this particular question. So one of these items is definitely not like the other, although you can actually get a little bit, if you want to get into the weeds on this one, you could. So incentive to commit fraud will usually include all the following except what? So remember when we talk about incentives, another term for that is considered to be pressure, something that actually motivates somebody to commit a fraud. What would be an example of this? Well, I'm going to say one good example of a pressure would be a financial pressure. And we all agree on that. That financial pressure represents a pressure. I'm going to say that it's got the word pressure in it, probably represents a good pressure. Personal habits and lifestyle, all right. If you're living luxury, a life of luxury, you probably need more money, so it's going to be a pressure against you. Feelings or resentment, like you basically said, I've got to get even with this person, I got to get back with them. That could be perceived as a pressure. Or gambling addiction. You need an addiction of some type, alcohol, drug, or gambling addiction. You need money to fuel your addiction, so that could be a pressure. The only one that really doesn't represent a perceived pressure could actually be A, inadequate segregation of duties. What would we call that in the concept of the fraud triangle? What would that represent? Opportunity. Yeah, opportunity. Now, by the way, the reason why I said that you could diminish this is like you got into feelings of resentment. Feelings of resentment could also be construed as an attitude or a rationalization. And I acknowledge that. But I think the clear answer here is going to be A, inadequate segregation of duties, because that's very obviously never going to be a pressure in any context. It's going to be opportunity. All right, question number 9. A message digest is a result of hashing, which is the following statements about hashing process is true. So we talked about hashing, or talked about hashing within that. We also talked about that in the project that we did right before spring break. We talked a little bit about hash key functions. But what is the nature of hashing? Is it reversible? The answer is no, it is not reversible. Comparing the hashtag results can ensure confidentiality, or hashing results can ensure confidentiality. So that's not what hashing is supposed to accomplish. Hashing actually has one item or one purpose whatsoever. And that's basically to ensure that two files, the one that's sent and this one that's received, are identical to one another. So when we talk about hashing, hashing function is just basically making sure that that's correct. And that actually goes back to what we talked about before. We talked about cryptographic hash functions. What was the purpose of that? It's to solve and validate that what was sent is exactly the same as what was received. So cryptographic hashing, this is kind of the same concept we talked about before. Hashing holds up this time, making sure two files are identical. This is going to be C. Which of the following vulnerabilities would create the most serious risk to a firm? Now, I both like and dislike this question. I would never ask this question on an exam because there's way too much open to interpretation. But I do think it's good to make value assessments because you can answer all of these represent some form of risk, but this is saying which is the most serious risk to a firm. So let's just go through this. Using open source software downloaded for free for the on firm's network. Could that be a risk to a firm? Absolutely, absolutely. Can we say it's a serious risk? Possibly. This is actually how the Target data breach occurred, is they were using open source software. At least one of their vendors was, and they were on the system. Okay, so it certainly could be a risk. Employees recording passwords in Excel file. Could this be a risk? Yeah, if they leave that Excel file open and somebody says, "Oh, take out my camera," snap it, all of a sudden I've got escalation of privilege. Okay, so there's certainly a risk that it could be associated with that. Employees writing instant messages during friends with office hours. Yeah, that could actually be a conveyance of information, especially if the friends are external. You could actually share proprietary information. So all these are risks. Which one's the biggest of these three? I don't know. Okay, those are all fairly subjective. But let's look at number 4, unauthorized access to the firm's network. Okay, so the first 3 are fairly undefined, but they need a lot of conditions in order for them to actually represent a serious escalation of risk. This is already an escalation of risk. This is where somebody has access to the firm's network that is not supposed to be in it. So at that point right there, we've kind of said the problem already exists. The first 3 were saying problems could exist given proper circumstances. And the fourth one, we're saying a problem already does exist. So I would say just based on that condition alone, this would be the most serious risk. Now, could you make an argument that all of these are risks? Absolutely. Okay. Could you make an argument that over a long time that one of these could be represent a more severe risk than the unauthorized access? Certainly. But right here, right now, the clear and present danger is going to be. Question number 14, the symmetric key encryption method. Let's just go through the answers. Is it slow? It is not. It's fast. It's much faster than asymmetric key encryption. It's not appropriate for encrypting large data sets. It actually is. That's what it's primarily used for because we're going to be sending information internally. Solves the problem in key distribution and key management. It does not solve that problem because it uses the same key. The problem is what happens when we have an external stakeholder? The answer is they can't use symmetric key encryption. So it doesn't solve that problem. Uses the same key for both senders and receivers for encryption and decryption. And the answer is yes on that one. D is correct. D is a correct assessment of symmetric key encryption. All right. Fraud triangle indicates which of the following conditions for fraud needs to be perpetuated. Okay. So remember, fraud triangle: pressure, opportunity, rationalization. A pressure to commit the fraud, opportunity committed, and then a rationalization, basically justifying the actions. Okay. So which of those are listed up here? Rationalization and pressure are. So it looks like only A and B are correct. Legal environment, while that's probably something that's relevant, it's not going to be necessary for fraud to occur, so we can ignore C. All right, for prevent repudiation in conducting e-business, what's probably important for this question is to understand what repudiation means. Anybody else, just whenever they see a word in this kind, like, I'm not exactly sure what that means, goes and looks it up on Google, says, what does repudiation mean? Yeah, I actually don't even do that. I just say repudiation definition. Yeah. So repudiation basically means is that another entity no longer wants to engage with you. From a business perspective, this would be a business saying, we no longer want to do business with you. So to prevent another business from saying, we don't want to do business with you in e-business, companies must be able to authenticate their trading partners. Well, it makes sense. Okay. Which of the following encryption methods can be used for authentication purposes? So, well, obviously, symmetric key encryption is the more powerful of the 2 encryption key methods. So that would be the one that's best for authentication, right? Did I trap anyone? Or is everybody just kind of like, I'm not going to shake my head or move my head. I'm not going to move my head any way, step, or forward. So I was trying to trap you on that one because symmetric key encryption, while a more powerful conveyance mechanism, cannot actually authenticate. Because remember, we don't operate externally with symmetric key encryption. The only way we can authenticate is using asymmetric key encryption, because we can primarily that with hashing for authentication purposes. So B is our only answer. B is the answer for 16. All right, last one, last multiple choice question. Encryption is so what is encryption? So we talked about encryption. That's, if you think about encryption, we've talked a little bit about that already in this course, but encryption is basically disguising information. So easy way to think about it, a very easy encryption method would be kind of like the crypto quote method that I think we did as an activity earlier in the semester, where the letter A represents the letter Q, okay? That's a very simple encryption method. Now, much more complex encryptions are going to go beyond that, but it's still just based on the same thing. It's like the Imitation Game, Benedict Cumberbatch movie. Everybody seen that? Yeah. If you haven't seen that, it's a fantastic movie, by the way. But so encryption is basically disguising the information. What is the goal of disguising information? Is it to correct or to detect and correct a problem after it's already occurred? No, it's to prevent unauthorized access to information in the first place. So we send encrypted messages. We don't want anybody to be able to access that information in the first place. So it is a preventive control. It is a preventive control. All right, moving forward. Talk about some problems. So let's go to match description with each encryption method. So we have two types: symmetric key encryption, asymmetric key encryption. All right. So I don't know. Do we want to do hand signals like S? A? No, never mind. I'm not going to
Just
do
do 1, 2.
it. 1 and 2. Okay. So that's a good idea. It's a much simpler method. Why would I do the complex one? It's have to be more fun, you know. But all right. Good for large data sets. Is that 1 or 2? 1. Okay. I see a few people holding up 1, and a few people just like it's 1. Okay. All right. Symmetric key encryption. Yes. Good for large data sets. Slow in processing. 1 or 2? I see a lot of 2s, and 2 is correct. Okay. That's asymmetric key encryption. You need it for key distribution and key management. Which is that? Okay. You may argue 1 because there's only 1 key, Dr. Barnes, but keep in mind we're trying to solve problems in key management with asymmetric key encryption, so answer is 2. All right. Each user has a public key and a private key. That's by definition, that's asymmetric key encryption. And good for authentication. We just talked about that. We can't use symmetric key encryption for authentication. We have to use asymmetric key encryption. So that's going to be our answer for that one. Good job. Good job. All right. So now we have some statements here with some system availability terms. And you'll notice there's 6 statements and only 5 availability terms. So one of these is going to be used multiple times. So let's see if we can sort through this. By the way, I'm going to add a little bit of a wrinkle to this. In addition to talking about what is the term that's being used, I want to talk about whether it is a preventive or a corrective control. Because remember, that was something that we talked about in chapter 16, is specifying whether these control types represent preventive or corrective control. So activities required to keep a firm running during a period of displacement or interruption of normal operations. So this sounds like either disaster recovery planning or business continuity management, okay? So the question is, what is the difference between those two terms? What is the difference between these two concepts? Business continuity management uses the word continuity, which basically means that we want the business to stay up and running during a disaster. We don't want it to shut down. Whereas disaster recovery says the system has shut down, let's get it back up and running as soon as possible, okay? That's a kind of significant difference there. What is being described in A? Saying keeping the firm running, all right? That sounds like continuity, which would be 5. So business continuity management, and BCM is what type of control, preventive or corrective? That is a corrective control. A problem's already happened, so we're going to fix the problem. A process that identifies significant events that may threaten its firm's operations, outline procedures to ensure the firm will resume operations if such events occur. So this is the saying, a problem happens, the firm shuts down, we're going to fix it and get it back up and running. We just talked about that. That's disaster recovery planning. And much like business continuity management, disaster recovery planning is a corrective control. A service model in which a third-party service provider offers computing resources, including hardware and software applications, to cloud users over the internet, and the service provider charges on a per-user basis. So which one is going to be the one where it's computing services or computing resources are offered to cloud users? What do you guys think? It's a mystery to me. It's a mystery. We're going to say cloud computing. Yes, cloud computing, okay? Cloud computing is a form of control. And what is it going to be, preventive or corrective? It's going to be preventive, okay? We want to make sure we have an infrastructure in place in the first place to prevent problems from taking place. All right, next is a clearly documented plan that covers key personnel, resources, and IT infrastructure and applications and action required to be carried out in order to continue or resume the system for critical business functions. Now, this one's a little bit misnomer. Continue, which you might want to say that's business continuity management. But the more focus is going to be, there's a problem, let's fix the problem. The system goes down. This is more of a better definition of disaster recovery planning. Now, if you put business continuity management, I don't blame you, okay? The terming is a little confusing, but technically speaking, it's 4, even though 5, there's an argument there. We've already said DRP is a corrective control. User redundant units provide a system with the ability to continue functioning when part of the system fails, okay? What is that definition of? We talked a little bit about that in the end of chapter 17, okay? Part of the chain breaks down, but the rest of the system keeps going, okay? Want to make sure that they can tolerate any problems that occur. Fault tolerance? Yeah, fault tolerance, which is a preventative thing for that to happen. All right. And a device using battery power to enable a system to operate long enough to back up critical data and shut down properly during the loss of power. Okay, so we had power used twice there. So can we say uninterruptible power supply? Yeah, probably really good there. That's again a preventive control in that regard. All right, very good. Last question of the semester last homework questioning semester. I can't get rid of the exam questions, but we can talk about this. All right. So in each of the fraud cases, identify the incentive, opportunity, rationalization present. Now, these questions are a little bit strange in the fact that some of these are not clearly distinguished, so you may have had to speculate a little bit. And you could use your imagination. I'm assuming that going through the homework, it could say, well, there was not clearly described in the case, but I'm assuming this person is a supervillain, and so they're just naturally evil, and that's their rationalization. Which, if that's the way you did that, kudos to you to being creative. Okay, so Collective Telecommunications Payroll Department moved to a new position with the department, which she no longer has privileged access to payroll accounts. However, when changing positions, her access to the rights of the payroll account were left unchanged. An associate told her he was starting a financial service business and needed some contact information. Using the privileged access rights, he retained the employee provider associated with confidential information of many employees, including 401k account numbers, credit card numbers, and social security numbers, which he then used to commit more than 100 cases of identity theft. The insider's actions caused more than $1 million worth of damages to the firm and its employees. All right. So I think the primary focus that we want to take on this one is let's identify the opportunity first, okay? Now, is there a clear opportunity here?
Yeah, her access wasn't revoked.
Yeah, access was not revoked upon changing positions, okay? So certainly an opportunity to commit fraud there. What about the pressure here? Pressure could be pretty much subtle. It's not really defined, but we could say somebody asks for information, I have to provide them information, okay? Now, here's the interesting thing. We can approach this rationalization from either a nefarious perspective or an innocent perspective. By the way, these are not technical terms. I'm not going to ask you about nefarious rationalization versus innocent rationalization on the exam. But we can actually kind of think about this way. Innocent rationalization would be, well, this person asked for information. It's my job to provide information. I'm going to give that to them. Okay. That's my responsibility. Okay. The nefarious one could be, well, I'm really unhappy at changing my job, so I'm going to take this information and, you know, if our company gets harmed from it, well, it's their fault. They should have fixed this problem in the first place. So what do you personally want to believe? Was it an innocent rationalization or a nefarious rationalization?
It's the innocent because it mentions no negative emotions inside the paragraph, whereas in others it does.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. So it's probably somebody who was just trying to do the job to their best abilities, probably knew that they should have done something differently, but what's the worst that could happen? It's not like 100 cases of identity theft could have happened because of this. Yeah. All right. A database analyst, a major check authorization, a credit card processing company went beyond his unauthorized computer access rights. The employee obtained his firm customer information of 8.4 million individuals. Stolen information included names and addresses, bank account information, or credit and debit card information. He sold the data to telemarketers over a 5-year period. So opportunity here is obviously there's an escalation of privilege, okay? Escalation of access to where this person was able to access information they weren't supposed to. What do we think the pressure is here? This one's really, really speculative, okay? What's that? Money, yeah. So this person is basically, he's trying to build a camper van. That's cool to say that, okay? Because that's what I've always wanted to do is build a camper van. Has anybody ever seen YouTube videos on camper vans? I'm obsessed with them, yeah. So say they want to build a camper van and need to save up money, so I guess stole the money for that. And then what's the rationalization? They can get the money through doing this, so the ends justify the means. Okay, so sure. Pressure and rationalization are not really obvious here. Opportunity pretty obvious in this one. An IT consultant working under contract for an offshore oil platform company was denied an offer for a permanent job at the same company. He then accessed the firm's computer system without approval and caused damage by impairing the integrity and availability of the data. Woo! Boy, that's somebody who's just the poison pill job offering right there. It's like, you know, you've done good work, but we don't feel that you're appropriate to hire. We're afraid that if we hire you, you might access our system and do damage to it. This is, well, if you don't hire me, I'm definitely going to do that. So Anyway, opportunity there. It looks like that they had, again, an escalation of privilege. They were actually able to access systems without approval. And so, certainly a problem with that. Pressure. I really need this job. Please give me this job. Please give me this job. Oh no, I don't have this job. Rationalization. Those jerks did not give me the job, so I'm going to wreck their computer system. The story is old as time. You know, person comes in as IT consultant and doesn't get the job, and then just vows revenge against a company that's corrupt and brutal. Yeah. So somehow I don't think that's going to make a Disney musical anytime soon. Yeah, but yeah, still old as time. Stale as old as time. Anyway. The last one, manager responsible payment authorization hired an offshore programmer to insert a couple of independent contractors in the vendor table database. He then authorized payments to the independent contractors on fictitious service of personal gain, spent the stolen money on luxury item and extravagant purchases for himself, his family, and his friends. This is an interesting one because you basically have got the manager who's got authorization for hiring and then apparently authorization for transactions as well, which would obviously be a problem within the system. But you notice that said, I'm going to hire these people who are going to have responsibility for recording these vendors in there in the system. They actually can place the vendors in the system. So authorize the payments on the transactions to independent contractor services. So the opportunity is that he actually has apparently a lot of ability to affect information in the system. Can authorize contractors to actually work in the system. So basically, people who have administrative status, which we like having in NetSuite that we talked about, administrative status. They can actually manipulate the system and create new vendors within the system itself. So authorization or recording in there in multiple different areas. And then pressure, luxury items and extravagant purchases. I will say once you go luxury, then you just never want to go back. You know, I can't say that personally. It doesn't ever been me. The worst that's happened is I flew first class one time and I never wanted to go back to flying coach again. But I had to come back down to ground literally. And so, yeah, extravagant items, extravagant purchases, that's a pressure. And so they need money. That's also the rationalization. Need money for those luxury items, those purchases. So fraud triangle, pretty fascinating, pretty dynamic. It's pretty easy to conceptualize, but a little bit more difficult in application, but something we will talk about moving forward. All right, with that, we are done with homework for the semester. Woo! All right, have a good day. I'll see you all on Friday for the exam review.